Hello, this is Sondra Oster, Baras, bringing you a few words of Bible from the heart of Biblical Israel. This week's Torah portion is Toldot, and it begins with the story of the birth of Jacob and Esau, twins. Okay, and of course it begins the story with the fact that Rebekah is barren, and every one of our significant mothers were barren. The only woman who was not barren and who had ease giving birth was Leah. And of course that is seen as a sort of compensation because Leah was the afterthought. Leah was given to Jacob as part of Laban's trick. She was never really loved by Jacob, and therefore as a kind of compensation for that very difficult position, she immediately has children. But Sarah, Rebekah, and Rachel are all barren women. So this is the story of Rebekah, and she doesn't have children. And what do? They immediately, both of them go and pray to God, which is also, it is an interesting contrast because later on we will see when Rachel is barren and she goes to Jacob and she pleads with him, help me do something. Instead of saying, why don't we go pray together? His answer to Rachel is, well, what do you think? Why do you come to me with a complaint? Who am I, God? Okay. And that's quite a different situation where here we have that Isaac and Rebekah both go and pray for a child. Okay. And God responds, and she is pregnant, and she has this very odd feeling because she has twins, but she doesn't really know that. But there's a lot of turmoil going on in her womb, and she's trying to figure out what that is. And she goes to ask God. She goes to pray. She asks God, and God tells her a very, very significant prophecy. He says to her, you have two nations in your womb. Two different nations will come out and separate from you, and each one will struggle against the other. These two children will represent two different nations. They will be struggling against each other, and the elder will serve the younger. Okay? And then she has children, and she actually has, then she has children, and there are two there, and the older one is Esau, and the other one is Jacob. Okay, and then we move on to the story of these two young children. But what do we learn from the beginning, from these first verses? First of all, we learn that Rebekah is a prophetess. She has a direct word from God that not only tells her she has twins, and therefore when she's feeling an unusual movement, it's because there are two babies in there, moving around. But the prophecy is about what these two children will become. They will not just be two sibling rivals, but they will become sibling rival nations, okay? And at the end of the day, the elder will serve the younger, which means even though Esau is biologically the firstborn, it is Jacob who will be the superior brother. So here she's already given the prophecy that helps her to understand what will happen later on. Because later on, Isaac is going to want to bless his two children. He will be already older, and this we have in this week's portion as well. It's the continuation of the story that Isaac is old, and he feels like he will be dying soon. He doesn't die right away, but that's a different story. He has trouble seeing, and he wants to bless his children. Now, it is fairly clear, it's certainly clear to Rebekah, that Esau, in the eyes of Isaac, is the firstborn, and therefore he wants to bless him with the blessings of a firstborn, that he will have the superior physical or material blessings, and all these different things that are part of a firstborn inheritance. Now Rebekah, though, has already been given this prophecy before these children were born, and so she understands that it is not Esau who is the firstborn, it is Jacob, and therefore she masters this whole plan and convinces Jacob to go along with it, to trick Isaac into giving the original blessing he was going to give to Esau, to give it to Jacob instead. Now, there are, of course, a lot of questions that arise from all of this. First of all is, why did Rebecca just go say to Isaac, no, you got it wrong. This is the prophecy that God told me, okay? What we see in a few other places, that there are prophecies that are given to a particular person, and that person doesn't tell that prophecy to somebody else. And there is a sense that when someone receives a prophecy, it's not for him to share with other people unless God tells him to. For example, when God speaks to Moses, all the time we see God speaks to Moses, tell the children of Israel. And of course he does. So we have that very much, part of what's going on. But when we have the prophecy to Abraham about the birth of Isaac, okay, we have two separate prophecies. We have this prophecy being made to to Abraham, and this is done first of all in chapter 17, and later, afterwards, in the next chapter, when the angels come to visit, it is only then that we have this prophecy that Sarah herself hears as well, and she doesn't know it clearly, because for her she laughs. It says here, the angels are telling this to Abraham, and she hears it, and it says they're very young, and it says this is in Genesis 18, chapter verse 12. Sarah laughs. How is it possible? Okay. Now, if Abraham had already told her the promise that he had received in the previous chapter, she wouldn't have laughed because she'd already heard it. If she would have laughed, she would have laughed earlier. If she wasn't going to laugh now. So again, this is a precedent for this idea that just because God gave a prophecy to one doesn't mean it's their privilege to share that prophecy with somebody else. So that really then makes sense, okay? But there's another issue. Rebecca herself sees things about Esau that Isaac doesn't see. And when we see the blindness of Isaac, we begin to wonder, does it only mean that he's blind physically so that when Jacob comes, he doesn't really notice that it's not Esau, because all he's doing is feeling his arms, and of course he made his arms very hairy, so he feels like Esau. But there's a sense here that Isaac may not understand Esau's true nature. The Esau is very good to his father, and he brings him food, and he hunts for him, and he does all these wonderful things, but he may not realize his true nature. And this is something that Rebecca understands better. And therefore, and it could be that this says something about a not such a great type of communication between husband and wife. But let's remember that standards of communication between husband and wife in biblical times were not necessarily what they are today. And therefore, it makes sense that Rebecca feels that she needs to manipulate the situation as opposed to just sitting down and having a conversation with Isaac. Again, because she probably feels she cannot share with Isaac the prophecy from God. And if God does not seem fit to share it with Isaac himself, who is she to share it with him on her own initiative? And I think this is something that really pays to keep in mind. Many people will blame Rebecca here and say, what did she do? But let us remember that it is God himself, okay, who makes it very clear when Jacob, as a result of this whole thing, has to run away from Beersheba, from his family, and he runs to Haran. It is God who says to him and promises him that he will indeed inherit the blessings. And he says, your children will be like the dust of the earth. You will spread out west and east, north and south. Through you will be blessed all the families of the earth. That is an exact quote of the promise and the blessing that was initially given to Abraham. Isaac himself, at the end of the story, understands that it is Jacob, not Esau, who will be his heir. And before Jacob leaves, he gets a blessing from Isaac, and Isaac gives him the blessing of Abraham. So Rebecca, we may feel uncomfortable with her manipulations, but there's no question God blessed her efforts. And God saw in what she was trying to do what needed to be done, because it is Jacob who is the rightful heir of Isaac, not Esau. Have a wonderful weekend. Shabbat Shalom.
I hope you enjoyed that film. And we have lots more film content and emails and articles that I'm sure you will enjoy as well. Check out our website at CFOIC.com and subscribe to our newsletter. You can do that right from the homepage. I know you will really enjoy the content that will land in your inbox on a regular basis. Hope to see you soon.